this idea of we've talked a lot about mediocre things, but also these categories of the two things that are worth spending your time on: uncommon and common things.
Yeah. Uncommon and common things are, uncommon things are sacred things and holy things, but there might also be things that endure for centuries, things that offer some knowledge of the transcendent, things that don't go away. Brandenburg concertos, Homer, Virgil, things that no one assumes are ever going to die from the face of this earth. Like Homer's just going to be here forever. Virgil's going to be around forever. Bach's going to be around forever. And then there's common things, which are good. They're just plain good. I think uncommon things are very good. Common things are secular things. They're worldly things. They're average things, normal things. And heaven and earth are not naturally at war with one another. Heaven and earth are made to be friends. Secular and holy things are made to be friends. They're made to be compatible with each other. As a matter of fact, most holy things were once secular things. God has a habit of creating things normal and then graduating them into the realm of the holy through a series of ceremonies and rituals. But these two things, the common and the uncommon, have a good relationship with each other. They ought to. We ought to think of them as having a good relationship with each other. They are man and God. They are heaven and earth. They are the 6 days of the work week and the Sabbath on which we rest.
Right.
And one of the major ideas of the book is that common things and uncommon things work together in a kind of harmonious relationship, and then it's mediocre things that are a kind of cancer that corrupts our ability to enjoy both common things and uncommon things. I don't think that common things corrupt our ability to enjoy uncommon things. I don't think that earth turns us off from heaven. I think earth, rightly understood, works with heaven. It works alongside heaven. Christians are working to do and to bring the will of God to play and to be at work on earth as it is in heaven. There's something about earth that yields to heaven kind of naturally, which is why the virgin birth of Christ is not unnatural. It's a miracle. It's a fulfillment of nature. It's not a war with nature. But
it occurs to me that this theme is Tolkien is very concerned with this theme, actually, of this relationship. Well, because a big thing for him is this ennoblement of lower peoples by contact with higher peoples, and yet the preservation of the good that is, the common culture of, the hobbits or of men, but they are ennobled by contact with, elves who have been across the sea to the west and have been in contact with the demigods, who in turn have been in contact with the creator, and that there's this kind of ennobling, and in the end, the lower peoples end up serving these higher purposes.
No, that's good. That's quite good. I like that. I have to teach the Two Towers to a bunch of freshmen in a couple of weeks. I'll certainly bring that up with them. I think that's a wonderful point.
Cool.
Common things don't last indefinitely. This is the theory of the book, that the common cultural artifacts might last for about 75 years before they, like men, just kind of fade. They lose their potency. They lose their... they kind of lose their attachment to the earth.
Is that because they're less good, or is it because they're less universal?
I don't know. I think common things are apt to fade away because their goodness is a lower sort of goodness that's not...
it's more tied to its time.
Yeah, that's right. It's more tied to its time. It doesn't have... I think you're right to bring in the concept of universality. There are some things that'll make sense to Americans born in the 20th century that really won't be all that meaningful to people by the 22nd century or 23rd who don't live in America, or who live in America, but society has moved on in terms of the styles and trends and fashions and concerns and and the ways in which both virtues and vices are considered. But then there's also things that will last indefinitely, things that are not merely American, things that are not merely Christian, things that are not merely, I don't know, for the educated, they're not merely for the uneducated, but that they truly have a kind of human quality to them that makes them endlessly considerable.
Right.
To people of all races, to people of all ages, to people from all eras. So, yeah, I think that common things ultimately go away because they're replaced with common things that are maybe closer in time to later generations.
Is the folk music of a people a common thing or an uncommon thing? Because it seems to last a long time. It's a tradition that's passed down.
Yeah. I'm going to put that in the realm. It's something that often comes up in conversations with, in the book. I think that that's actually an uncommon thing because it lasts. Okay. And I'm careful in the book to say that uncommon things are not just super expensive things. That they're not just, they're not high culture, right? We often think of like Brandenburg concertos or paintings of El Greco as like high culture, and I want to keep people away from thinking that uncommon things are just high culture. Many things that do count as high culture are uncommon, but I think that there's a lot of traditions that are associated with various holidays that kind of enter into the realm of the uncommon. Like there are foods that you would only serve at Christmas time. Right. And they're not really expensive foods, but they are just firmly lodged into this super traditional kind of cultural practice where we only break them out at Christmas time. And I do think that those things are uncommon, even if they're cheap. Like they don't have to be super expensive. They don't have to be made in Italy to be uncommon. They can simply, in their perpetuity, in their survival over many centuries, they can gain this quality where they're filled with time as opposed to destroyed by time, and they can put us in touch with many prior generations, and we can be fearful of losing those things. So, I would say that this cool. The example, one of the more effective examples given in the book is the kind of quilt that's not all that expensive to make, but which becomes extremely valuable over the long haul of time. It becomes an heirloom. Heirlooms, you could have an heirloom that's valued at $100,000, at $200,000, that probably cost a couple $100 to make. But it's become this sort of uncommon, enduring thing through the effort of all the people that have been the custodian of it. And I think that folk music is probably that same way. Right.
Yeah, so common and uncommon and low and high culture are not exactly the same, but it does seem like there's similarities in terms of this symbiotic relationship that they can have. I think about this a lot with music, how in previous eras and even earlier in the 20th century, there was this symbiotic relationship between not only folk music and classical music, say, but also between folk music and popular music of the time and classical music, where there was it was a lot more likely that a popular arranger was taking inspiration from great classical composers, for instance, and there was just this, but also that of course, great jazz musicians, great classical composers could take riff on a folk melody or a popular melody of the time and make something more of it. Right. And this was a very, very fruitful thing. The fact that Leonard Bernstein was on TV, in the 50s and had a popular television show and things like that were things that have really been lost today.
Very true.
What is it about mediocre things that make it harder for us to appreciate common things?
Mediocre things are more pleasant than common things. And I don't think that there's any point in denying this. One of the draws of mediocre things is that they are pleasant, but that they don't cost more than common things. I think uncommon things are generally more expensive. It's not, not always true. But again, the example from the book, like a common lunch and a mediocre lunch probably cost about the same. You can buy you can buy a loaf of bread and some ham and cheese and make yourself just a workman's lunch for $4 or $5. Put an apple and a bottle of sweet tea in there, and that's something that any construction worker could eat for lunch. And it's not going to be the tastiest thing that you've ever had. It's not really going to be worth talking about. You could do that for $4 or $5, or you could go to Taco Bell and get $5 worth of food. And the food that you're going to get from Taco Bell is more pleasant. It's like weapons grade pleasant. It's only the pleasant things about food all kind of collapse in the same spot. And this is just fast food. Fast food's all sugar, and it's all fat, and it's all savory. It's not demanding. There's nothing difficult about it. It's just fun and pleasant from front to back. Which is not what a ham sandwich and an apple is. Like a ham sandwich and an apple is, probably a lunch that's just worth looking forward to, but it's not going to blow you away. The goal of Taco Bell is to blow you away for $5. The goal of KFC is to just annihilate you with pleasure for $5. And they're going to make it as tasty. They're going to make it weapons grade tasty so that your mouth is just filled with pleasant flavor. And I think that sort of thing makes an actually fine meal seem boring by comparison. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't think that a ham sandwich makes a fine meal seem boring by comparison. I've got plenty of, I probably used to be this way too, but, students that would have like a high protocol night and they'd go out for a fancy dinner, and then they'd get hit up Jack in the Box on the way home afterwards. Like they were just unsatisfied with higher, better food. They needed something that was just very intensely pleasant, and they were only willing to, be satisfied by that. So that I think that's it. That mediocre things are more pleasant, but not more expensive than common things. Which means that if you want to enjoy uncommon things, you've got to spend most of your time on common things. And if you spend most of your time on common things, you have to be willing to live a life that is less pleasurable than someone who is choosing the mediocre option every time.
Yeah, you've mentioned this idea a couple times in this discussion of just cramming together all of the high points of something, all of the pleasurable parts of something. So it seems as though there's a kind of fragmenting going on to where at first, the idea was to just have, pop culture that's easier to digest and it's more exciting to the passions. But eventually that sort of chasing that to its end point for its own sake leads to the point where that's all you have. You don't even have like a substance behind. I mean, there is such a thing as good pop music and good popular cinema, Yeah. And I think Jaws is a really good movie,
Sure.
But there's a difference between Stevie Wonder and Kesha. When you chase that pleasure for its own sake and there's nothing behind it anymore, you end up getting this fragmentation of experience to where people might just even skip through a song. I mean, I used to do this in my heavy metal days, and as a teenager, I would sometimes just skip through a song just to get to the part that part is the part that really sends me, man. And so that's how these playlists works. These fast food flavors. There's less of a patience for getting the pleasure not in one instantaneous passionate bite, but in the cumulative effect of things. Right. Which is in kind of inherently a more intellectual pleasure too, because you are having to, at least in memory, you're having to combine the cumulative effect of things in your memory and sort of make sense of them and order them and comprehend the order and the relationship between them in a way that you don't have to with just a sheer like jump scare that hits you in the face in that split second.
Totally.